Well, welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. The liberal mainstream media is once again caught colluding with the left. According to a report from the Washington Free Beacon, quote, WaPo reporter goes rogue, gives strategy briefing to secret Dem donor conference. The article continues, quote, Washington Post reporter Janelle Ross gave a presentation at a secretive California gathering where Democratic politicians, liberal activists, and their biggest donors plotted the future of the progressive movement without notifying her superiors that she would be attending, according to a Post spokesman. The Washington Free Beacon claims to have obtained a copy of the conference agenda that lists events and featured guests. And according to the agenda, speaking right before Janelle Ross was none other than leftist billionaire George Soros. We reached out to the Washington Post for additional comment, and we were told they have nothing more to share. Shame. All right, joining me now with reaction is the national spokesman for CORE, conservative commentator Nigel Innes, founder and executive director of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk, and from Fox News Radio, Todd Starnes. Thank you all so much for being here with me tonight. So the mainstream media often fails to cover Democratic scandals. Do you think that this report, Todd, proves that it is more purposeful than just a simple kind of ignorance of the scandal and not really aware of it?
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, Kimberly, this is an example of not just fake news, but propaganda news, where you actually have a reporter from the Washington Post going into this secret meeting and gathering all this information. Quite frankly, it is a direct violation of the Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics.
Wow. Yeah.
That Code of Ethics says, and I want to read this here, avoid conflicts of interest, real or perceived, and avoid political and other outside activities that may compromise your integrity. Well, it's very clear this is exactly what this Washington Post reporter has done.
Yeah, Nigel, this is quite disturbing when you hear this report. I mean, what were your initial thoughts, when you found this out?
I was not surprised. I mean, George Soros is our very own living Dr. Evil, if you recall, from the comedy films. But it's actually deadly serious because he's not only the foundation, if you will, of every left-wing group and supporter of every left-wing politician, from Kamala Harris to former President Obama, but he also has an international network of NGOs that he funds to sometimes openly undermine governments and counter U.S. foreign policy. One of the scandals that I hope that the media really exposes and investigates is something that 6 U.S. senators have asked Tillerson to look into, which is how our government is actually funding NGOs that are tied to George Soros, that are actually contradicting U.S. foreign policy in places as far-flung as Macedonia to Zimbabwe. That's the real scandal. And the fact that the Washington Post is in bed with these folk makes me a little concerned, but I have to say I'm not really all that surprised.
Yeah, Charlie, you surprised?
I'm not, but it's important to note George Soros is a big problem, but just right behind him, you might have missed the news with all the Black Friday shopping, but there's a new richest man. He's worth $100 billion, Jeff Bezos, who conveniently owns the Washington Post.
Yes.
In fact, he acquired it last year, and he went through a huge purge of anyone that believed in freedom and hired a bunch of very left-wing journalists and reporters. And in fact, right after Donald Trump's surprise victory, he hired personally over 50 new journalists and reporters that went all over Washington to try to find evidence of Russia collusion, so on and so forth. So no, this is of no surprise. The Washington Post, which is one of the most well-read newspapers in the country, has now become a political arm of the leftist causes. And you see they're invited on the front and center stage of the secret meeting with George Soros. But it's important to remember Jeff Bezos is just right there with George Soros through the Washington Post doing this exact same sort of behavior.
He's absolutely right. Charlie's absolutely right, Todd, because he has become increasingly more, dangerous in terms of his level, his reach, certainly his financial ability to influence and corrupt American journalism.
Oh, absolutely. And again, consider what happened here. You had a reporter who was assigned to cover President Trump inside the secret meeting, strategizing with these progressives and with these leftists. And the Washington Post, they tell us, well, we didn't know anything about it. It's news to us. Instead of being horrified and embarrassed at the fact that one of their reporters was demonstrating a clear bias by attending that meeting.
Yeah, and seemingly no repercussions whatsoever, total blind ignorance, looking the other way, Nigel, to this situation instead of actually, engaging in journalistic ethics and following this through and doing an investigation and then providing some kind of accountability.
Can you imagine what would have happened if some Fox News reporter or some Wall Street Journal reporter had ties to the Koch brothers? I mean, this would be on the top of 60 Minutes. This would be the top page of the New York Times. The silence on the left is deafening with this conspiracy on the left. And look, there's one thing that I'm hoping in the next 3 to hopefully 7 years of President Trump's administration, that he cleans out the cobwebs of this international network. And you're right, your other guests are right. It's not just George Soros. It's the cabal of left-wing folk like Bezos and other billionaires that we don't hear from that are behind this international effort to often undermine and contradict actually stated U.S. foreign policy and cause domestic mischief.
Yeah, well, far-reaching implications and unbelievably, inappropriate. The levels of impropriety, no bounds. I mean, Charlie, what do you do about this in terms of trying to, not just saying hopefully the Trump administration is going to do something. I mean, do you have some thoughts about what should be some kind of constructive framework or plan to try to investigate this and bring about some accountability and ethics?
Well, there should be some accountability and ethics, and it should start with the Attorney General should open an investigation into the Open Societies Foundation, which is George Soros' nonprofit, which, by the way, he just transferred $15 billion into. They have to give away 5% a year, and think about how much money that is. But there's good evidence to show that George Soros has been instrumental in funding grassroots left-wing groups such as Black Lives Matter and Antifa, which are now being investigated by the FBI. So you have to follow the money. You have to see, is he actually funding these groups, and where are they getting their source of training and their financial backing? And so what can be done? We need to get the Attorney General involved to see if there's any mischief involved in a lot of these domestic terror groups such as Antifa. But even more than that, we have to expose how the left have become funded by these centi-billionaires, now Jeff Bezos, worth $100 billion, to corrupt our democracy and to change the trajectory of this country.
Really, Todd, it's such a serious situation because the implications are so far-reach. I mean, you even think back just to the campaign and the paid protesters and what was going on. They're really trying to stifle, democracy and the election process. And now having the tentacles insofar is, very widely read and mainstream, so to speak, in terms of widely available newspapers that can really impact not just, American journalism, the truth, the facts that get out there, but as we've also discussed, implications of foreign and domestic policy.
What we have seen here is clear evidence of collusion, and it's not just the Washington Post. Remember back in the campaign when you had CNN asking the DNC to go over debate questions, when you had Donna Brazile turning over those questions to Hillary Clinton's campaign. Again, this is a very serious issue, and it's important for all of the viewers to understand they need to be news consumers as well. They need to be good stewards of where they get their news, and it's important for all of us to understand what's really going on here.
And read with a discerning and critical eye, Charlie, to make sure, that they're actually getting the truth. You should read from multiple sources, not just one, especially, and I think like you said, all you guys, follow the money. Look to see who is behind it, who is funding this, and who is trying to fill your mind.
That's exactly right. And the left tries to say that, conservatives are the party of the rich. Well, 8 out of the 10 wealthiest counties in America voted for Hillary Clinton. And now you have the world's richest man and the 4th richest man in the country funding left-wing causes, trying to disrupt democracy here in this country. And so the left has really been funded by these people that want to create a one-world government. They do not want to see America continue its international dominance, and they want to destabilize capitalism as we know it. This is very, very dangerous. These are people that do not share our values, and now that they have unlimited amounts of money, they want unlimited amounts of power, which exactly we know what the left wants. And what viewers have to do is continue to pursue good news channels such as Fox and read the Wall Street Journal and stay away from a lot of these news sources that are being funded by people that do not share our values or want to see America succeed.
Charlie brings up a great point, Nigel, but just the influence and the intention to corrupt an American, democracy and basically mind control people by putting forward this propaganda and pretending, parlaying it as journalism, following ethical standards. That's the real problem here, that they've been able to take it this far.
It's a real crisis, and it's a generational crisis, because the biggest impact of this propaganda that you speak of is on college campuses and our elite university institutions all across the country. So you have generations of young minds being poisoned.
Exactly.
And, you know, we've got an opportunity with this president in office. I applaud, I think it was Todd who said that the Attorney General really needs to investigate this. And I hope that Tillerson will take that letter from 6 United States senators that USAID needs to stop funding these George Soros-related and far left-wing groups that are oftentimes violent and kind of like a foreign version of Antifa that we spoke of earlier. This has got to be rolled up now. We've got the opportunity. We ought to break this network up as quickly as we possibly can.
Okay, Todd, quick final thought.
Well, look, instead of covering these big issues, you have people like CNN's April Ryan, who's out there suggesting Sarah Sanders faked baking a pecan pie for Thanksgiving, for goodness sakes. This is what we're dealing with.
You can't even
here.
make this stuff up.
You can't make it up. You can't make it up.
Listen, I don't fake baking pies. I just get them at like Magnolia Bakery.
It's a good-looking pie.
All right, go for the experts. All right, thank you guys so much for being with us tonight.